Whatever that probe was picking up, it's reading life form.
What do you mean a life form?
Oh, the head.
They're changing.
Changing into what?
It's moving. These things moving.
What is that?
There's a ship.
They're leaving.
To go where?
Earth.
We were so wrong.
Take us home!
If you don't stop it, there won't be any home to go back to.
Why is that door open? Cut it off! Cut it off!
For the Promethean task of tackling Ridley Scott's kind of sort of prequel to his 1979 sci-fi classic Alien, we knew we needed a heavyweight. Please welcome the Chicago Tribune's titan of film criticism and a regular Filmspotting contributor, Michael Phillips. It's great to have you back on the show.
It's good to see you, Adam.
That's my android voice, you see.
I like it.
Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. Josh actually told me that my setup for Prometheus should simply be, it's a prequel to Alien. What did you think of it? Of course, I can't do that. I'm sorry.
Settle in.
I've got a book here, basically, to set this up. We'll see how I do. I have to give a nod to Slate's Forrest Wickman this week. He wrote a piece called What Not to Name Your Spaceship, in which he warns the people of the future about the folly of christening their state-of-the-art craft something grandiose like Icarus. If you're taking on a mission of vital, or let's say hubristic scale, he writes, the names of Greek tragic figures should generally be avoided. Director Ridley Scott, who with Alien drew vessel naming inspiration from the always jolly Joseph Conrad, perhaps could have used Wickman's advice. For his latest film, he didn't just name his ship after the Greek god who stole fire from Zeus, gave it to mankind, and was banished to spend eternity bound to a rock while an eagle ate his liver. He went all in and named his film Prometheus as well. But such hubris should perhaps be expected. After all, Scott is boldly returning to the world that made him an international star, mining the material that produced a film that consistently ranks at or near the top of the list of the best sci-fi movies ever and the best horror movies ever, plus gave cinema one of the all-time great action heroines in Sigourney Weaver's Ripley. With Prometheus, he's upped the philosophical ante. The crew is on a mundane mission to discover, just the origins of humanity. So, Josh and Michael, I want you to indulge me and agree, for the sake of our discussion here, that Prometheus is a slightly more ambitious film than Alien, at least in terms of its big philosophical concerns. As this team of scientists searches for their creators, a team, I should add, led by the girl with the dragon tattoos, Noomi Rapace, with support from the sexiest android not so alive, Michael Fassbender, the notion of faith comes up repeatedly. And it occurs to me that how much you enjoy Prometheus may largely depend on how much faith you're willing to put in its creators. For the believer, the film's many unanswered questions and curiosities become provocative ambiguities. Scott and screenwriters John Spates and Damon Lindelof work in mysterious ways, but we must honor and obey. For the non-believer, all the questions and curiosities are more likely just genuine plot holes and bad storytelling. So, Michael, let's start with you. Are you a believer or a heretic? And before you answer, we're going to sacrifice all heretics at the end of the night.
I like this film. It's more ambitious and a hell of a lot more expensive than the first Alien. And yeah, I'd be surprised if there's anybody alive, including Ridley Scott, who would actually prefer this one to Alien. But it's a different kind of thing. You can't go back and remake that film and have a film land the way that one did back in 1979. You see that original now, and it's remarkable how it has this sort of faith in, okay, we'll kind of take our time. The first 40 minutes is strictly slowly building dread and atmosphere, and then you have this astoundingly gory emergence of the alien from John Hurt's chest, which is a scene.
Spoiler.
Yeah, right. And to see that now and how they achieve that, it's kind of stunning because it's just kind of a paper mache chest with a puppeteer, and nobody cared. It was terrifying, and it also got one of the great kind of scary, funny laughs I've ever heard in a movie theater. Now, is there anything like that in the new one in Prometheus? There is a scene. I don't want to go into too much, but there's a scene that kind of works on the same terrifying alien bodily invasion principle,
and it's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
And yet, of course, you're thinking the whole time, well, it's a variation on what you've seen. That is this film. It is a series of variations on themes you've seen before. Ian Holm was an android in the first Alien, and Michael Fassbender. It's not a reveal when you discover Fassbender's an android. That's how he's established, and it's a character you've seen variations on. He's a little like Hal 9000 in 2001. And the thing is kind of bits and pieces of all these other movies, and yet I like the fact that Ridley Scott is kind of a square, old-school filmmaker. This film, even if it's hardly glacial in the pacing, but it's not. It doesn't feel like it was made for itchy 14-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And my son will be 14 in a couple of years, so I'll eat my words then. But even if the film wasn't particularly well written and a lot of its assembled parts, I kind of went with it. Yeah, I liked it. I think you probably liked it more. Is that
You're correct. I did like it more, actually, but I'm going to defer to my co-host here, Josh. Heretic or believer?
I'm not a believer. I don't know if I'm a heretic. That's a little strong. I'm not a believer. But
no, you're just wrong.
The movie, no. The movie challenged my faith in the whole sci-fi fantasy genre as of late. I think its fatal flaw is something we've been seeing quite a bit, probably in the last 10 years, within films of this genre. I'm going to call it a mythology problem. So in place of streamlined narratives where you've just got your story point and you go and you let the movie move and be a movie, we're kind of looking at these overwritten labyrinths full of naughty mythologies. There's laborious origin explorations. That's essentially what this whole movie is. So it's kind of restricted from getting on with being a movie. And these genre pictures they're being burdened by lore. It's this love of lore that we can't get enough of. And I'll give you some examples why I think it extends beyond Prometheus. It almost starts with the Star Wars prequels a little bit. It's a weakness of those. As much as I do like those, it's definitely a weakness. It's a burden that's carried by almost every superhero flick and comic book movie that there is. And I think it's a trend that nearly derailed what was an excellent television series in Lost. And just some individual titles I'll throw out there, too. Matrix Revolutions, Alice in Wonderland, some others that came to mind, Tron Legacy, John Carter from this year, even the latest Star Trek. To varying degrees, these are so interested in their mythologies, their inner narratives, that they don't allow these films to exist as a movie that has any forward propulsion. So for Prometheus, what that means, then, is we have this, let's explore the origin of the alien from Alien. That's a great concept for a prequel, okay? I'm all on board. Let's do that.
If that's, in fact, what he's doing. I'm not so sure.
That's what he ends up doing, and that's all they end up doing. It's this. It's not a launching point for a new story. It's this reason for indulging in all sorts of alien history, how it relates to human history, the mythology of the Alien franchise itself. And we just get really bogged down in this. So if you think about it, Prometheus doesn't really move forward. It just kind of expands outward and backward to a degree. And I just sat there waiting for it to get going.
You're listening to Filmspotting. We're live at Lincoln Hall for our 400th episode. Josh Larson, Michael Phillips with me, Adam Kempenar. We're talking about Ridley Scott's new film, Prometheus. And it's interesting what you say about the mythology, though, because I find with most of those films you mentioned, the mythology is my favorite part of those films.
It could very well be a personality
It's everything
thing.
after the mythology that tends to derail those pictures when the plot actually really kicks in.
Josh, do you believe in mythology?
No, not at all. That's my main problem.
Which is actually part of the problem with this film, too. I would say there's no doubt that the first half of the movie is a lot stronger than the second half, but the first half is so phenomenally good, and I'm surprised, actually. You know, Michael said it very well. He made the comparison a little bit to Alien. You know, you have a film where 40 minutes is just kind of chugging along, and then it hits you with something big. That's exactly how this movie proceeds. The same, Ridley Scott's doing the same kind of things from a camera perspective in terms of those slow, kind of graceful shots through the spaceship, and really just building tension and building the stakes and establishing the mythology step by step. I think he does it really well.
It's the anti-Alien, because Alien had, again, this streamlined narrative. We're going to get going on this story and allow ideas and themes to bubble up from a horror flick. That's what Alien is. But it happens to have Weaver and these other sort of maternal undercurrents to the story that allow those interesting things to bubble up as far as the feminist angle and stuff like that.
The first one's a very unpretentious picture.
Exactly.
The screenwriter, Dan O'Bannon, said, hey, it's Jaws in space. You know, that's it. And Jaws had come out 4 years earlier, and that was...
Which isn't an insult.
No, my God, I love Jaws.
But Jaws, too, allows the dread to come naturally. Here, Prometheus is so involved in its mythology and what it might mean, and they're talking about the big ideas and implications that it doesn't come up naturally. It's given to us, and then the movie is kind of forced to wrap itself around those ideas.
It's like I wish it were better written, and I'm actually
It's
surprised.
overwritten.
I'm surprised I went with it despite it not being really kind of anything really fresh in terms of story. I guess I just find that he's just my kind of square, this director. I think there's, and I'm not like a Ridley Scott, he's not in my top 5 contemporary filmmaker list or anything, but there's something kind of reassuring about his craftsmanship, and even in a film I like more than I guess most people, the last Robin Hood, which is no great movie, but
there's a lot of mythology in that,
a
too.
lot of mythology in that, and that's another one where maybe to Adam's point, the first half, even if you don't like it, the first half is certainly working better than the second. I guess I find the kind of the crystalline example for me of why it's familiar, but I liked it anyway, is Fassbender as David.
He's excellent.
Yeah, he's excellent, and you have seen this archetype many times. He's very much like Jude Law as Gigolo Joe in AI in terms of this sort of very unsettled, just not quite human, android, and he's a really witty and meticulous actor, and that's the performance, and you don't question the fact that it's a cliche or it's too familiar while he's on screen. And really all the performers are good. I kind of wish they had pulled a different variation for the Charlize Theron character who plays, in a way, a variation on the Paul Reiser character in the second in Aliens, where he's just basically kind of the untrustworthy company
corporate
rep.
overseer.
Yeah, who's this is $1 trillion mission funded by a mysterious corporation, of course, aren't they all? She's an ambiguous figure in terms of, is she pure evil, or just a company flunky, or something more complicated? And I guess that's why the movie worked for me in the end, even with all these problems. The people's motives aren't entirely good and evil, and the movie isn't really. God knows it doesn't have any of the kind of rooting interests. Or it's not a rouser like the second Aliens, which was just pure audience baiting, bloodlust adventure. It was great. I like the first one better, but there's really kind of there's a lot of splattering going on in this film, but it's not really that kind of picture. It's all about, as you say, Adam, it's Scott's and the screenwriters' illustration of the idea that humankind's a bunch of idiots for going out there to look for. Their
makers.
It's like Meet the Parents, essentially, this film.
Well, let's go from that to Michael Fassbender. You mentioned him. We have to talk about his performance, I think, a little bit more in detail, and conveniently, we have a clip from Prometheus.
Am I interrupting? Thought you might be running low.
Pour yourself a glass, pal.
Thank you, but I'm afraid it will be wasted on me.
You think we wasted our time coming here, don't you?
Your question depends on me understanding what you hope to achieve by coming here.
What we hoped to achieve was to meet our makers, to get answers. Why they even made us in the first place.
Why do you think your people made me?
We made you because we could.
Can you imagine how disappointing it would be for you to hear the same thing from your creator?
All right, so that's Michael Fassbender as David the droid with Logan Marshall Green, who is one of the scientists, Charlie, who has come on this mission. He's a little bit disappointed. Well, actually, you know what? I'm not going to give you any more details. You got enough from that scene. But I'm with you, and I know I talk about Fassbender a lot, so it's just a given that I'm going to praise his performance. But no, really, it's phenomenally good in this film. And I like what you said, Michael. I love the ambiguity of the droid character here, and I think it's a nice touch that's different than Ian Holm a little bit, who is much more straightforward. He's hiding something in Alien, but he's much more straightforward in acting emotionless and acting like you would expect a robot to. I think that there are elements here in Fassbender's performance where he walks that precise line very, very clearly, where you can tell by his physical movements and even his manner of speaking sometimes that he's not quite human, but there are those moments where vulnerabilities and even perhaps insecurities come through that make sense because the movie sets up that he's been studying these people. He's been studying humans, specifically, there's a great scene in the film where he's studying a movie and trying to emulate that character. So he would know how to at least put on a show like that. And he, at one point, he even says something along the lines of, I'm here to make you comfortable by being as human as possible. So I love that we're getting a little bit of a variation on that droid character.
He's nefarious and innocent at the same time. It's a different spin on the android robot character, I think, that Fassbender brings to it, where he causes a lot of problems, but not because he has some evil intention. It's almost like it's his programming partly, or it's how he's reading things or letting logic rule the day, but he's this wild card that's really going to mess things up, and Fassbender plays that perfectly.
And I think the introduction scene where we meet that character the first time, again, it's straight out of 2001, where you see the astronaut, one of the astronauts, jogging, and you're just kind of getting to know what's going on with this that very skeletal mission. And here it's a bigger crew, but you have Fassbender bouncing a basketball as only an android could, which is like almost human in this sort of like robotic precision of it off the walls and things. And it's very simple. I don't think there's any dialogue. That's the kind of minute and a half of filmmaking that makes me think, Ridley Scott really. He's almost 75 years old. He's kind of, he's hardly a classicist. He's not. It's not like he's David Lean or, he's a very interesting mixture of kind of in the vanguard for technology, but also very old school. Like, this is a film that has an awful lot of built sets. Mm-hmm. I mean, they filled out Pinewood Studios in London, 5 times over, and a lot of movies, especially on this budget level, it's 125 million, something like that. It would be doing some of that, but an awful lot of digital and green screen stuff. And there's plenty of that here. But this is Scott's first film shot digitally and in 3D, and it's not the kind of 3D that. Did you see it in 3D, man?
I did.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of 3D that you don't like it
pointless.
at all.
I mean, it really is. I mean,
at least it doesn't detract from the film, which it didn't for me.
No,
I like that scene where they're doing paddle ball, where they do paddle ball into the camera.
That was great. I don't know how the alien held the paddle ball in its whatever those are.
But you honestly think it's just pointless 3D?
Completely.
Really?
Well, Coraline maybe would be the one reason. And Avatar.
So some films have used it effectively.
Yeah. When it's thematically, I mean, this is a whole other discussion. When it's thematically appropriate to the film at hand, it can be used as a tool. I don't really need it. I think it actually enhanced Coraline. That might be the only example.
You're listening to Filmspotting. We're not talking about Coraline here, live at Lincoln Hall. We're talking about Ridley Scott's new film, Prometheus. Adam Kempenaar with Josh Larson, and our guest here, Michael Phillips, a regular Filmspotting contributor. I love being able to add that, Michael. But I want to go back to Ridley Scott a little bit. I know we've talked about him. I don't want to focus on the whole auteur question too much, but I thought it was interesting because it actually did provoke a couple of thoughts for me in terms of what I really like about this film. We got a question, Josh, I know you saw it on our Facebook page, from a listener named Josh Goodhart, who said, after rewatching Alien, I'd be interested to hear thoughts on Ridley Scott as a director or auteur. Does he have a distinct style? I have to confess, I think I've seen almost all of his films. I have not considered them. I've never written about them in detail. I've never really given this question a whole lot of thought until Josh posed it. But one of the things that did come up for me as I watched this film, that I saw those connections to Alien in terms of the way he was staging the film, not only the way he was building suspense, but one of those things that does seem like maybe a little bit of a Ridley Scott trademark, if you will, a little bit, is his ability to put, and you talked about it with the sets a little bit, Michael, to put things in perspective and to have a sense of scale. And it's something, if you go back to even movies like Black Hawk Down, where he's shooting a war scene, and rather than succumbing to the trend that a lot of people do where they just make it as chaotic as possible and a lot of close-ups, he's got those elements too, but he also is constantly reorganizing. He's resetting the scene. He's showing you where they are, where the bad guys are, where the good guys are, and what's going on in the scene. He does that here, but what I really love is that sense of scale, where you have man out in space doing something the movie's telling us very clearly they probably shouldn't be doing, and he emphasizes that with the camera by showing us the people looking one way and then the people looking completely different when they're in the shadow of the ship itself, the Prometheus. That's one thing that's this huge, technological thing that weighs over them, but then that ship on this planet, in this landscape, in this mountain, in the tunnels they're looking at, the people are always minute in the frame. The ship is minute in the frame. And he just visually does reinforce exactly what the message of the film is in very subtle ways, I think.
Yeah, I think that the fact that you didn't answer that question before it was posed to you about Scott being auteur, though, answers the question. He doesn't really come to your mind with these thematic things. I think he's a very, very, very skilled servant of the scripts, which is why when you look at his filmography, it's very uneven.
Uneven, yeah, that's a good point. I think there's just the one thing you might look at for a through line with him is that he and his brother Tony, the Lesser Scott, are they brothers? I think, right?
I like the
Tony
Lesser Scott.
Tony
actually.
Scott, the Lesser
I think that's
Scott.
his Twitter
legally
handle,
changed his name.
Scott the Lesser, and he come out of a certain school of television advertising at a certain time, and there's a kind of a cold, sleek glamour to a lot of Ridley Scott's work, good and bad, and he's got kind of an interesting glamorizer's touch. It's not. People tend to look pretty good even when they're suffering horribly from alien bodily invasion, and but he's got a sense of how to create a world, based on pretty meticulous design work, and put the audience in there. And yeah, I think you're right, Josh. It's they live and die on the quality of the scripts. He's not so shrewd a filmmaker that he can overcome. He can't make Prometheus seem less familiar or kind of bits and pieces from other movies than it is, but he can really kind of do a hell of a good welding job.
For me, it is a matter of this film. Filmspotting listeners and everyone here in attendance may not be surprised to know that I can nitpick this film. I can definitely come up with problems with this film or things that didn't work for me. Some of those things I alluded to in the setup in terms of some of those things that maybe aren't just provocative ambiguities but are actually problems with the script. There's no doubt that it's not just some of the writing, it's actually in terms of the structure and information they leave out or too much information they give us. On the whole, though, I was really engrossed by this film on a similar level to the way I was with Alien. I don't think it's as good a film as Alien, but I had that same kind of deja vu feeling that I didn't go in expecting, but was hoping for because I'm a fan of that film. I'm a fan of Aliens, though, as well. But I guess in closing, any final remarks on Prometheus?
I think the mythology thing is a personality thing. I'll say that. It's not that you can't use that as a tool for a good film, but when it becomes too dense like this, it's just not doing service to the story.
Okay,
well, I think
it is dense.
I know that you have a problem with sort of the on-the-nose quality of naming the ship Prometheus, but in the original script, it was the USS Human Folly, which was, I think, even more obvious.
Tone that down.
So, yeah.
I like it. Nicely done. Prometheus is out this weekend in wide release. If you get a chance to see it and agree or disagree with our takes, you can email us feedback@filmspotting.net. You can also leave us a voicemail, 206-203-2463. You can also find us on Twitter @Filmspotting and over on Facebook, facebook.com/Filmspotting.